So thank you for joining us in person and on Zoom today. I'm Megan Doherty, the director of the Museum of the White Mountains. As we gather today, we're all on Indigenous lands. Those of us at the Museum of the White Mountains are on Indakina, which is the ancestral and present homelands of the Abenaki and Wabanaki peoples. We're grateful for their stewardship of these lands and waterways. For those of you on Zoom, we've put some links in the chat where you can learn more about the Indigenous histories of your place, native-land.ca, as well as the Abenaki peoples of Northern New England through the Musée des Abenaki in Quebec. And we're so delighted to have you here today for our second Know Your Neighbors event. And I wanted to start first by reflecting a little bit on what we heard in the surveys after our first event in June. A couple threads that came through were that people were really interested in finding ways to pool resources and networking to be able to share those resources. Also, two of the things that came through, I'm gonna mute there. Two of the things that came through for folks were wanting to hear more about success stories, right? Not wanting to kind of focus on the negative, but hear about successes. So that's part of what we'll talk about today. We also had a lot of votes for the transcription project.
Thank you, Megan, for having me here today. Megan's been to our museum building a couple of times, but before it was open, she got to see it when there was still a little chaos in the building as we were getting ready to go with a couple of days left before the grand opening. Our story for the Bartlett Historical Society and Museum is about a building that has historic value. It was built in 1890, and we have transformed it from originally a church to it went into a phase where it was a warehouse, a storage facility for the school district, and almost collapsed, and then we took it. So the time span on this project, it really is from 2014 to 2024. It was a lot of work to keep it going and keep it alive, but we did. So let me start with just, there we go. So to begin this is a project vision that we created back in probably around 2015. And we have kept this vision consistent from that point through to now. That basically, we said that we wanted to save, renovate, and transform this building and make it into a museum, a multifunction museum that we could not only display the artifacts that we have for Bartlett, Hart's Location, and Livermore, New Hampshire, but also complete the other part of our mission, which is sharing and allowing people to learn about those three towns and the history of our region. So we wanted to leave no room for confusion. We wanted this to be consistent, and we did that throughout. So in anything that I sent out, I referenced that constantly. So as I got thinking about how to do this, all of a sudden a movie script came into my mind. This is like a David and Goliath kind of thing. We're a little historical society. Andrea knows how small we are. We've never had a project like this before. The largest project we ever did was to renovate a snow roller, and that cost us all of $2,500. We're looking at a $600,000 project now with people who truly doubted we could do this. An engineering report that I found from, I think it was 2008, said basically that the contractor who was asked to do an evaluation on the building didn't want to spend a whole lot of the client's money, that was the school system, because the building was going to come down anyway. Well, we proved that was wrong. So we started this project, and the movie goes on where little things happen, and the momentum starts, and all of a sudden we start to see donations come in, and the ability for us, we're debt-free, to do things to renovate this building. And then in 2014, it happened. We actually, 2024 rather, it happened, and we put this together. So the end of the movie, we have a lot of hard work, a little bit of blood. There was no question about that. a lot of sweat, perseverance, and a building that many thought was doomed. Even we kind of did at one point in time, is now the center of attention in Bartlett. So this is a slide that shows two buildings. They're the same building. Back in 1879, the building on this building right over here was the original church. It had a priest's apartment back here. It had a dormer back here for the priest because the apartment went into the building. We even had a steeple. Today, this was the 2016 picture, and it really doesn't do justice for what that building, the condition of the building, but the roof on the building is basically concave on both sides. It looked like this. The collar tiles in the building, in the frame of the roof had failed. They had cracked, and then started pushing the building out. The rafters cracked. The roof leaked like a sieve. It was just in tough shape. So this is another picture of the building on the left-hand side. You can see the building in about 1960, where it was in reasonably good shape back then. You'll notice that there are 3 arches in the building. Keep that in mind. And the pews, well, you can see in the next picture over, the pews are gone. And the picture on the far right is just one picture of how bad the building looked when we first started. Now, if we could do smell-o-vision, you wouldn't want to walk into that building because it stunk of mold. It was just horrible. The floor was soft only because the rugs right here, when people came in snow boots in the winter, they delaminated the plywood that was underneath. So when you stepped on it, it was like a Disney experience. You thought you were going through the floor, but you really weren't. It just dropped you about a half an inch. That's all. The first thing we did in 2019, November of 2019, was we had the interior gutted because the building had asbestos, mold, and lead paint in it. We couldn't have people work in that building without being concerned about their health. So this is what it looked like while it was, I guess you'd say, under the first major pieces of renovation of the building. So on the far right, they left us with a completely clean building. The mold, the asbestos, the lead paint were gone. The building actually smelled like wood. It was really great. That was the one comment people made when they came into the building. There are 4 parts to this presentation, and I'm going to be jumping a little bit into pictures, and I'm going to jump into each of these 4 points. So I'll cover why is this project so important, managing the challenges to success, marketing and fundraising, and project execution. And I think these are the 4 key elements to the project. So the first one we'll touch on is why is this project so important? So St. Joseph Church, as it was known, is the first Catholic church in the Mount Washington Valley. It was known as the Eastern Slope region when it was first built. It was built in 1890, and it was built by a priest who came from Whitefield. So I've heard a couple of people from up north that way, and he used to come down here to do masses. Hence, when he came, he would stay in the apartment. The church was closed in 1999, and it was sold to the Bartlett School District at that point in time. The school district was going to use it for their drama and music programs, but they found that the lead paint and the asbestos in the building were just too much to remediate. So they used it as a storage facility and did virtually no maintenance on the building. And our winters up north had a ball with that building. Historically, historical recognition for the building, the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance in 2017 awarded us a 7 to Save award for the building. And in 2018, the we were placed on the State Register of Historical Places. From a community perspective, this was one of 3 churches that were of long duration in the town of Bartlett. The Congregational Church, which is also in Bartlett Village, was built in 1897. And Bartlett Village was a community that was, as I call it, the blue of blue collar. It was railroaders, it was mill workers, it was people who were in various physical hard labor activities. So they either went to the Congregational Church or they went to the Catholic Church. And both congregations shared a lot of things with each other. For example, the Catholics used to go to the Congregational Church when they had church suppers. When the Congregational Church had a fire in 1987, the Catholic Church opened their doors and said they could have their services there for a number of months. So St. Joseph was an integral part of the town and that area. When it closed, it was a real blow to the community. And there are people today, some are still very angry because they call it their church, even though it's our museum, it's their church. So renovations were underway. The first step was the hazmat. The second step was that roof. Now that roof was pushing the building out about 9 inches on the south side, which is this side right here, and about 7 inches on that side. You couldn't look down the side of the building and see the other end of it. You'll notice that there are, right where that pointer is, there are some very faint lines. Those are 3/8 inch steel cables that we put into the building to hold it together over the winters because we didn't have enough money to start. So we didn't try to pull the building in, we just snugged the cables up. When we took the roof off, those cables were as tight as guitars, and the guy that was up there hooking up that crane, those 4 things that were pulling the roof off, they were as if they were a steel beam up there. So we took the roof off, the cables sagged. The balls came back together a little bit, which was great. We put a new roof on with all these trusses here, and that was the new roof right there. This guy right here is me. I did a lot of work on this project. Andrea knows. Okay. After we got the roof done, and there were pauses between because we had to raise money. Those first 2 pieces of the project cost us almost $200,000, and that's all we had. So after we got the roof done and we raised more money, we put in new mechanical systems into the building. So we have a new furnace, we have new wiring that's actually up to code. We have plumbing now that is up to code as well, which is great. So the next part, managing challenges to success. So we had a number of challenges, both with the building as well as outside the building. Let's just say it that way. The first thing we ran into when we started this project was some of our board members were not exactly excited about it. This is a very risky project. We were talking about raising a lot of money and a building that in the beginning was not in good shape. I mean, when people went into it, they saw major cracks in the walls. They saw everything falling down inside, the water pouring into the building, the bowl shape of the building. So we had to convince the board members that this was a project that was doable. I stuck my neck out pretty far for this one. So what we did was we asked them to write down all their objections, all their concerns, all their questions, and we addressed each one of them over a very long meeting. In the end, we had one board member who said, if we don't do this project, they were done. And they felt the Historical Society would come to an end. And I kind of agreed with them. We had other board members who were saying, okay, we were against doing this, now we're okay. And then we had only one who said, I'm still not sure, but I'll go along with it. So That was enough that what we needed, we had commitment, and not only personal commitment, but we had financial commitment as well. The other thing was community challenges. Now, I said that the community was for this project, and they really were, but there was a number of people who were just not quite sure about it. So I mentioned the quote before about the consultant who said that the building was going to come down, so they didn't want to waste a lot of money. That's true. We had some alternate suggestions. We sent out a survey to the community, and Andrea's laughing because she read one. We had some interesting comments come back on that survey. We wanted to get an idea of what the community support was like. Most people said historical society. However, I felt I'd share a couple. One was a bar, one was a swimming pool, and really we did get one that was a house of ill repute. I don't know why somebody would put that down, but they did. This is right next to the elementary school, by the way. So anyway, we move forward with that. We leased the building in 2016 from the Bartlett School Board, or with the Bartlett School Board. We bought the building for $1 in 2019. Other challenges. As people know, older buildings are money pits. And we had those doubters who said, when we started going out and campaigning for funds, it'll never happen. We had plenty of those. As a matter of fact, I had one guy say to me, if I want to look at something old, when I told him it was going to be a museum, he said, if I want to look at something old, I'll look in the mirror. So we got a very small donation from him. Anyway, so with the roof project and the hazmat project, as I mentioned, they drained our money, but there was positive from that because we started to see donations come in where it was a struggle before. It became less of a struggle now because people saw something tangible had happened. We ran into some legal issues. One of those, the biggest one was that this is a building that we were buying from the school system that they own. So they really didn't care about where the boundary lines were for the property. It was also considered a commercial building by the town because it's a museum, but we're in a residential zone. We weren't close enough to Route 302, which would have put us in a good position to be a residential. So we had to go before the Bartlett Planning Board and get boundary line adjustments done because the school's playground was right down the old boundary line, and we really didn't want to own half the playground, so that we moved that and we got that straightened out. We had to then go before the zoning board of adjustments to get approval to get a special exception, and even though we all know each other there, but it still took almost an hour to get that squared away. So anyway, in the end, both said no. The selectmen finally said, I'm sorry, both said yes. The selectmen finally said yes. And honestly, if any one of the three had said no, I wouldn't be standing here right now. We had a slow start to our capital campaign, as I mentioned. And I don't blame people for being a little skeptical in the beginning. But again, as we got moving along, we started to see the campaign pick up some speed. So we had some other outside influences, as people can imagine. We had COVID, we had inflation, we had the shortages with COVID. Everybody was building decks and everything else. So all the building materials we needed were going all over the place. And so it was kind of a challenge at times to get through this. Labor was tough to get as well. One of the things that we started doing was buying materials in advance. So for example, on the roof project, where we needed a good amount of sheathing board for the roof, we actually bought that almost a year in advance because we knew we were going to have to do the project. We just didn't know exactly when. We got a good price on it. And by the time we needed it, and the lumberyard was willing to hold it for us, which was amazing, but that was the power of having a good contractor working for us. By the time that we were ready to use it, the price on that material had gone up threefold. So we actually saved quite a bit of money by doing that, and we did that several times. So our renovation is really underway now. One of the things that happened here, challenges, was we were dealing with, as I mentioned, an 1890 building. Those 4 windows and the 5 on the other side are brand new. We took the stained glass windows out, and you'll see in a bit how we dealt with those. We put those into light boxes. They're hung on the interior wall of the building with an LED panel behind them that simulates daylight. So they look beautiful, but they don't have any outside connection. Now we have these windows in, but when we went to put in these windows, they're all standard size, all made in the factory. The frames, because it's about 16 on center, it's about square when you're doing this kind of a building, the frames all had to be adjusted. This building had vinyl siding on it. And when we tried to work around the vinyl siding, it didn't work. It cracked, it broke, and everything else. So we were going to have to fix that. Our contractor found also that the vinyl siding had been installed incorrectly, and water, especially on this side of the building, was seeping down behind the vinyl siding and the wood. Well, wood and water, you get rot. So we had to make a big decision. We had money that we were going to put to the interior of the building, but we now were faced with a $75,000 project to take the outside of the building, strip it, clean it all up, fix it, and then put new clapboards on. After a discussion with our board and our advisors, we decided that that was the way to go. So we did. So in the end, we then got the building all squared away. That you can see the side of the building on the upper left. That's from the playground that we would have owned. That is how the building looked. We also ran into a problem on the front of the building that we had to deal with. See the foyer that's right there. And if you look carefully, right about here, you can see what looks like a gap. Well, that building is right now sitting on 2 tree stumps. Or it was anyway. That's what we found. And we saw that the building had pulled, that part of the building had pulled away by about 3 inches from the main part of the building. So it was because the tree stumps were rotting, and over time they're just going to sink. And so we had a lot of work to do, more than we thought, but we got that all done. We put a new sidewalk in, and eventually a new concrete pad that'll go off to the right-hand side of that picture for a handicap ramp. So this is a jump forward, but we really spent some time on the outside of this building. You can see now that we've got on this side, we've put in, there's the new ramp so that anybody can get into this building. The concrete underneath it was donated by Coleman Concrete. The foyer is attached to the building again, and it's now on concrete. And on this side, we're showing the granite steps and the new railings that we put on. The red door is significant because this is no longer a church, but on a church, the red door indicates welcome and no mortgage. And we did this project without a mortgage, because nobody was going to give us one anyway. Okay, moving on. Marketing and fundraising. So this project was a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. As I mentioned, we were raising money as we were doing things. So when we got a significant amount of money or enough money to do a piece of the project, we did. The other piece of it was we had some volunteer support that saved us a lot of money over the course of the project. And as I already mentioned, we bought some materials in advance. So from our marketing perspective, we used all the avenues that we could think of to get people aware of this project. And we wanted to get it in the eyes of not only the public, the general public, but businesses as well as foundations. We use the Conway Daily Sun, and we fortunately have a good reputation with them, and a good relationship with them. These are just some of the headlines that were in the paper for us. There are more, but we were able to tell our story in either press releases or Tom Eastman from the Conway Sun came up and came through the building, and we were actually, the Conway Sun does a feature every Saturday, which is an extended article. We were the feature twice on that in the paper. We used multimedia to as much advantage as we could with our website, with Facebook, newsletters. I put out a quarterly newsletter, and now we have to change gears on the newsletter because I'm not going to talk about what's next on the renovation now. Now I'm going to talk about what's next in the museum. So that's exciting. We were able to get on radio, and we have a local cable television program that we were able to get on as well. Part of the issue here was keeping this project alive, because we're over an extended period. Most capital campaigns go for a couple of years, and if they haven't succeeded by that point in time, they've lost the energy. We had to keep this project alive until we could finish it, and we did, which was fortunate. And it wasn't until the last year of the project that we really jumped ahead with a major, I mean, we almost tripled the amount of money that we were bringing in the last year. And we think that's because people who were doubting that we could do this saw that we were going to do this, and they finally listened to me keep telling them we're going to be successful. And we started to see the donations roll in, and it was great. The other thing was transparency. I made sure that we told about our accomplishments and we told about what was coming next. But I was never shy about telling people what some of the issues were that we were dealing with in this project. And when I told them of the issue, I also told them how we got through that issue. Or if we hadn't gotten through it yet, I told them some of the options. So I was very open with this project, and I didn't try to hide anything. One of the things that I heard from people was that they appreciated the fact that they did see something tangible happening. They did see that there was something that there was something to give to, and they appreciated the fact that it wasn't all roses. That this project did have it's certainly its bumps and bruises, and we shared those with them. From a fundraising perspective, we did not have a consultant on this project, and many of these campaigns have consultants, and we interviewed a couple and we decided not to do that. One of the reasons was the amount of money that they charge, and I figured we had to raise that much more money. Secondly, I've been in the volunteer in nonprofit organizations for going on 40 years now. And I've been through two major multi-million-dollar capital campaigns. And so I felt that I could lead this thing. And fortunately, I was right. As I say, I stuck my neck out on this one. So the accomplishments that we had were things that I said back to people, this is what you're funding, your donations have helped us do. And I was able to point to specific things that we got done, and people responded to that, because we started getting requests from people, can I fund this? One of the things, for example, was our chandeliers. You'll see in a few moments, we have 4 chandeliers up in the building that are period-looking chandeliers. I received an email from a woman in Utah on Sunday afternoon a couple of winters ago, and she wanted to give us the money for the chandeliers. We were asking for $10,000. I had to tell her that, I'm sorry, but she wanted to fund the stained glass windows. I'm getting ahead of myself. She wanted to fund the stained glass windows. I had to tell her that we already had the money for those. The foundation had given us the funds for those. So we traded emails, and I suggested if she really wanted to do something for us, we had these chandeliers that we were looking to buy, and we don't have anybody on them yet. After about 2 hours, I got an email that said, where do I send the check? That was a great Sunday afternoon. Now, that lady did have a connection to Bartlett. So just so you know, but it was very nice that from Utah, we got a very nice donation there. We also did a lot of fundraisers, and we were, we wanted to show what we were doing, not just asking people for money, but what we were doing to earn money for this project. One of the keys also was these renovation open houses. The people who came in said, wow. So that it got people in and got them to see different stages of the project. So Megan's just giving me the 5-minute sign, so I'm going to try to hustle along here a little bit. At this stage, you can see now in the pictures, our renovation is complete, or is getting complete, I'm sorry. We're still underway, but this was just before an open house. We had the sheetrock up on the wall. 2 of us painted those walls very quickly. You could still smell the paint, which was good because people like to smell that. I don't know why. Remember the picture in the beginning? This one that showed the walls falling down and everything peeling? Well, that's what it looks like now, almost. And the picture on the far right is the stained glass window. Again, it's very hard to capture that with a camera, but that picture is lit with an LED light behind it. And we worked with a company out in Minnesota to put that together. They were very helpful. This is the building as the renovation is complete. The floor is painted. That's the original floor from 1890. A lot of repair work went into it, but we got it back together again. Remember the priest's apartment? Well, that's the stair rail from the apartment, and the ramp that's going up to the lavatory. The ramp are the floorboards from the apartment. So we reused a lot of things there. You can see the stained glass windows all around, and again, on the right, I really like this because it shows what this was like. This is the finished work with all the trim done. Lastly is project execution. Couple of keys here. One of the things obviously was that we needed to, with the vision, but we needed to put together a team of leadership for this project. So myself, with my project management background as a program manager for the Hartford Insurance Group, and a gentleman who was a good friend of mine, he built my house, and he's a local contractor, he's been in the business for about 40 years. He came to me one day and said, hey, I want to get together with you on this. So the 2 of us teamed up and worked on this project together. We were able to be very blunt with each other at times because there were times when we had to make decisions. We never fought, but there was a couple of times when one time I made a decision and he came to me and said, what were you thinking about here? And I told him, and he said, you're wrong. He said, this is completely wrong. And he let me have it. Well, later he called me up and said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, why? He says, because I hit you pretty hard. I said, yeah, I know, but we're friends. It's okay. And that's the way the project was. We were able to be honest with each other, which was good. We expected to have challenges, and we got them. We created a plan that was flexible and one that allowed for different things to happen. And we also made good and quick decisions. And sometimes we had to go back on them, as I just mentioned, but that worked out very well. With the slide, I'm sorry. So let's go on. So in conclusion, our building opened on October 19th, 2024 with great fanfare. We actually had 2 events. We had a Friday night event where we invited in the people who were very, very high level donors to us. In total, we had about 110 people come into the building over the two events, and everybody was very, very happy with what they saw. I lived on a motto that said, energy and persistence conquers all things. Benjamin Franklin supposedly said that. He's no relation, but that pretty much said it all, because there was a lot of work that went into this. So my wife told me it was too green, but couple things I want to point out here. One, just from key points of success, positive attitude all the time. We got the right people involved, not only myself and Bill Duggan, our general contractor, but we had the right people involved with subcontractors, advisors, and the whole bit. Clear and consistent vision. We never changed it. We kept it clear. We communicated on a two-way street. And by that, I mean, we not only told people what we were doing, but we listened to what people were saying back to us. And many times people gave us ideas and thoughts about how to put this together, and they worked. And most importantly was donor appreciation. So this is the building, the museum. This was just before we opened the doors, actually. So, and there we go. The gentleman with me out there on the, who's cutting the ribbon is Norman Head. Norman was the president of the Historical Society before he passed it on to me. Norm also, I worked with Norm on the project, but he decided that Mr. Duggan and myself were doing a very fine job, and he kind of took a little bit of a backseat, but we always kept him informed of what we were doing. And I thought it was appropriate for him to cut the ribbon. And so he said a few words, cut the ribbon. We did have Andrew Cushing from the Preservation Alliance speak as well, because we were 7 to save.
Once again, I'm Brian Burford. I'm retired as the New Hampshire State Archivist for 12 years. Prior to that, I was the New Hampshire Records Manager for 15 years. And prior to that, I was a land surveyor for about 20 years. So I've had some experience in a number of different ways. I'm currently the senior editor because I'm the one who started the project. I get to name myself and give myself a title of the Meshack Ware collection. Now, Meshack Ware, for those of you who don't know Meshack Ware, was the Mr. New Hampshire during the American Revolution. He was the head of the legislature, he was the head of the executive branch, and he was the Chief Justice of the courts, as well as a colonel in the military. So he covered just about everything. He was quite a correspondent with George Washington, but also with people in the towns of, I don't know, Enfield or Canaan or Canterbury or something of that sort. So he dealt with people great and small. Megan asked me to talk about transcribing. And one of the questions that I get asked is, why are we transcribing? And partly, I would point out to you that some schools are no longer teaching cursive. So some students are not getting training in reading the handwriting. So it's going to become more and more critical that there be people trained to do this. Secondly, there are probably computer programs and artificial intelligence that may be able to read some handwritings, but I'm still thinking that the human brain is still the operative best environment for the transcription, accurate transcription of documents from any age. So, oops.
You use the back arrow.
Yep. I can also do the scroll. The difference between transcription and historical editing is that I see transcription as being a part of historical editing. Transcription is the start of it. When you want to take it to a higher extent, then you get into historical editing, which includes filling in background context, which includes providing publication, public access, that sort of thing. But what you start with is basically the transcription. what would you transcribe? Well, if you're a small organization, you haven't done any transcription before, you might look at journals by people in the regional area. Because these are things where they're speaking about their life experience. And often it's interesting to know what they experienced in the same area that you are. One of my favorite transcriptions is my great grandmother's journal that she kept when she was a girl until she was a middle-aged woman, about her life in Sullivan County. And it's really interesting when she talks about the people and the people that she knew, the people, what they were like, what they were doing, and so on. And because it's been transcribed, we have an easy access to her journal. But it's not the same as providing a digital copy. It doesn't need to have a digital copy for a transcription to be published. Publishing can be amount of photocopying and passing around. Historically, transcription came about as a result of making sure that information survived. Just about any medium that we've written and recorded experiences on has a finite lifespan. I mean, when you think about it, we started painting in caves. They're about 50,000 years old. We still have a few of them left. We went to clay tablets, and those could probably last something in the order of 5,000 years. We went to papyrus. Then we went to paper on fiber that's made from cloth, which probably has a 500-year lifespan. Then, of course, we went to paper that was made with wood pulp, which is lucky to have a 100-year lifespan. And of course, now we're doing digital, and well, if you can get 20 years out of it, you're doing well. So to keep the information alive that's been recorded, you're going to have to do some kind of transcription, some kind of saving to bring it forward. We have no original writings, for example, of Plato or Seneca or Caesar Augustus. Everything that they had written on is now gone. Well, we know what they said because people over the centuries, over the millennia, have transcribed. And so historically, that's been the purpose of transcription, is to make things survive. But currently, there are other purposes to transcription. One is for those people who aren't being taught to read the cursive. The second is that it is good for individuals who don't see well and can have a computer actually read it to them out loud. And the third thing, of course, is by computer search. It makes access in some ways much easier. So the computer is actually a good tool for improving access to our transcriptions, but at the same time is sort of a drawback to the preservation of our transcriptions. There are a number of standards for transcribing. They're all basically the same. If you go to Harvard, if you go to the Library of Congress, if you go to the National Archives, they're all basically the same, but they vary in minor purposes. And it's because of the audience that they're aiming for. Some people are looking for scholarly audience. Some people are looking for a popular audience. Some people are looking for the handicapped audience. So it's making decisions, it's using the standards, but then sort of bending them to meet the needs that you foresee for your transcription. An example of the popular, of course, is something like Ancestry or Family Search, where they're predominantly interested in the names because their audience is looking for names and relationships. Whereas the National Archives is probably more interested in scholarly transcriptions. But again, they specifically cite that they are looking for computer searching capability. So the basics of transcription include basically write down what you see. This includes the spelling, the capitalization, if you can, the contractions and abbreviations, punctuations, line breaks. These are all variables that you make a decision on when you start. Who's your audience going to be? What are they going to need to be able to use your work? What do you do when you have inserted text? That is, they wrote 3 words and decided it really ought to be a 5-word sentence. And so they put a little caret and put over the line the inserted change to the. What do you do with marginality? What do you do with text that goes to the bottom of the page and then they turn the page sideways and write in the opposite direction, 90-degree change? Those are decisions that you need to make as you approach it and as you're looking at what your audience is. Oops. My personal standards that I am using for the Mishek Ware papers, which are basically a scholarly effort, but I'm using it for teaching college kids. Kids. To me, they're kids. Most everybody is kids these days to me. But these are college students that I'm using it as a teaching tool at Keene State. So I ask them to maintain the spelling as they see it and to realize what it is. They put in square brackets the actual spelling if they know it. They don't always know it themselves. Try to maintain capitalization, maintain contractions, but again, put in brackets what is being abbreviated or what is being contracted. Try to maintain line breaks. And I say that many institutions, for example, Library of Congress and National Archives, do not maintain the line breaks. But I want you to be able to say, I'm looking at an image of the original, and on the 3rd line down, the 4th word in is something that is just totally foreign to me. What did the transcriber think it was? And you can count 3 lines down and 4 words in and say, oh, well, I suppose it's there. So I tend to maintain the line breaks in the work that I do. One source that I find very useful, and I have a copy of it on the back table over there for the people that are here. I've opened it up to one page in particular that shows various types of squiggles used in New England records and what they mean. But Kay Kirkham began publishing these books, How to Read Handwriting and Records in colonial New Hampshire and colonial America back in the 1960s. I happen to like this particular edition. This is the 2nd edition, because the photographs of the samples are much better than the 3rd edition, which was mimeographed edition. There are other books that do similar things. I have not used them, so I can't endorse them, but I have used Kay Kirkham a lot over the last 40 years that I have been doing research and archiving. So this is one of the things that I wanted to point out to you, just as an example to sort of wrap up what I'm saying. But this is a document that is online through Keene State College. If you go on the Keene State College Archives website called KS Common, and you type in the 15026 number, the document that is entitled "The Humble Representation of Nathaniel Ware" will come up. This is what the website, the Keene State College Archives website, looks like. And did we get the? No, I don't have the dot. But anyway, over on the right corner, just down from the top, is the search field where you'd enter the 15026. And it comes up with this result, the humble representation. And then at the top of the screen, you can see the image of the document itself. This is a document that was written in 1683, I believe, and taken to England to argue against the New Hampshire royal governor, who was not a nice person anyway. He was trying to take away land rights for the people that were here. And so Nathaniel went to England to talk to the king and explain to him what was going on. The king fired the governor or replaced him with other individuals and did some changing to the New Hampshire government at that time. But as you can see, the transcription can help significantly reading the document. I can read the document fine, but so I was able to make the transcription. But you can see the transcription, the line breaks and everything else on the bottom part of the screen. To me, this is one of the reasons why we do the transcription, is to help people be able to have access to what was said. And then if we have the resources to put it online to make it easily accessible to anybody. So I would like to wrap this up before Megan gets her hook and yanks me off the stage. But I hope that this gives you some ideas about transcribing. Transcribing doesn't have to be a big project like the Meshach Ware papers. The Meshach Ware papers probably have about 4,000 documents that we have found so far, and we're still looking. But the goal is to transcribe each of them and put them online eventually. But it can be as simple as one letter or one journal that speaks to you and to your neighbors, speaks to your audience. You can have a picture of the document and then the transcription, and it makes that much more accessible to them.
So we've got a question in the chat and we can have a conversation. I'll try to read things out in the chat so that we have them recorded, and then I can repeat questions in person so that people on Zoom can hear them. So the first question we have, Phil, is what grants did you apply for, and which grants maybe did you get and accept?
Okay, if I sit here, can everybody hear me? Otherwise I'll get up. No, so we applied, there were two major foundations in the Bartlett, North Conway area that we applied to. One is the Goldberg Foundation, and they were very generous to us over the span of, I think, 5 years. The other one was the Ham Foundation. And so those two were major donors to the project. We had a number of private investor donor advised grants that were given to us, with some with specific criteria and some were just general to the project. So somebody's bound to ask me if we did apply for an LTIP grant, And we did. And in the end, we turned it down. It was far less than we expected or wanted. And one of the things that concerned us was for the smaller amount of money that they were giving us, they were requiring 5 years of reporting back in and out to them. And we just felt that that wasn't something we could live with in the long run. So not knocking LCHIP, they do a great job, but for us, it wasn't a good fit. But we did try, there were many that we got rejected on. We learned that historical preservation doesn't necessarily mean buildings. It means documents, it means books, it means artifacts, that sort of thing. When it came to brick and mortar, that was tough. They didn't want to hear about that. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah, Ruben?
Obviously, you've had tremendous success on the capital needs to do that project. I'm curious about any success that you've had with generating operating dollars or endowment to go forward now that you get the building essentially done, I guess.
Right.
So I'm just going to repeat the question.
Sure.
To ensure everyone heard it on Zoom. So the question was about essentially, have you had similar success with operating funds with as opposed to capital, the kind of ongoing expenses and
Or an endowment.
or an endowment? Yeah.
Right. So we're just getting started on the operational side. We had one winter where we actually had to turn the heat on in the building so we could be warm. So we have some experience right now with electrical and with heating costs and that sort of thing. Our insurance rate went up 4 times because they said it's an 1890 building. So we've got a lot of operational cost. We have a plan and we have sources, hopefully enough to cover the initial operating expenses and as we get used to it. And one of the things that we're doing is we're dividing out a fund for maintenance. We don't have an endowment at this point in time, and we're looking into some of the legal issues around what kind of endowment do we want to have. But we're also creating a fund for our collections so that sometimes we do have to buy things if people don't want to donate it, and it's worth money. We have had an individual already donate to our maintenance fund, which was great, and so we've had a 5-year plan for a while and keep updating it, so it's pretty accurate right now.
So Lizzie, who's from Whitefield, wants to know the name, if you know the name of the priest who came over from Whitefield.
Oh, sure. It's Father Joel N. Plant, Plante. And he was, we gather that he was a bit of a ask forgiveness priest rather than ask permission, because he first informed the bishop as a PS in what appeared to be a yearly status report. It was just a handwritten thing that we could actually read, believe it or not. At PS, he thought we needed to have a chapel in Bartlett. The next year, it was PS, I bought the land for the chapel in Bartlett. Where the bishop really got involved in this whole thing was when Father Plant was able to get half the money from a donor up in Whitefield, a guy named O'Neill. We don't know much about him. He went to the Littleton Savings Bank for the other half, and Littleton Savings said, we need the bishop to co-sign for this. And that's when apparently the fireworks happened. He eventually did co-sign, but that's why we got the impression that he asked forgiveness more than permission.
Thanks. Other questions on Zoom or here in person?
I have a couple comments. First to Brian, I'm pretty good at cursive. I can write cursive, I can read cursive, but you might infer from my accent, I'm not from around here, I'm from Germany, and the German cursive is different from the American cursive. So when I had some old, my previous job engagement, had some old historical letters, I just had a really hard time. Could I do it? Yes, but it was painful to get it going, and then again, next day for something else. So I have my volunteers transcribe it, and it's just incredibly helpful as in being accessible. So thank you so much for taking that on. And my other comment is that the Bartlett Historical Society let's call it building project, is a prime example for the reason it was successful was pretty much you alone. Your passion, Phil, your passion, your drive to get this going was absolutely exemplary. Yes, you did have an entire team and Norman helped a lot, but still, when I heard about it the first time, I was more than doubtful, but I was always amazed. Yes, and your drive and your passion, and you did it, you got it done, so congratulations, and that's the thing, sometimes things that appear not achievable, with the right amount of passion, we can do it. So thank you for doing that.
Remember, energy, persistence, conquer all things.
Yes. Yeah.
And what people learned about me, that I came to the North Country in 2014, so really nobody knew me. I met Norman, he was the first guy I really met outside of Bill Duggan. Well, what people don't, and people have learned about me is that when I do sink my teeth into a project, I will see it through to the end, one way or the other. And so, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. It was a team effort, but I didn't do it for myself, believe me.
Okay, but still, you were the drive.
Thank you.
Let's say.
Thank you.
Becky, I see you have your hand up and then you also, yeah, do you want to just go ahead? And unmute?
Okay, yeah, I was thinking the easier to just ask it, and I apologize if I missed something. Somebody knocked at the door and I had to run out and deal with it. That's the bad thing about Zoom. I appreciated Marcy's comments about people hammering in the background. But you know, in the case of both of your presentations, which were wonderful, certainly the Bartlett example is an inspiration to everybody. I have appreciated Brian's work for many, many years and benefited from it firsthand. My biggest and it may be a question, Megan, for a future meeting, is the issue of safe storage. And so, you know, we go to a lot of effort to preserve spaces and preserve them and also documents. But for a lot of historical societies and other organizations, the question of safe storage is a perplexing and difficult one and really expensive. And so I expect, Brian, probably a lot of people have given things to the State Archive just so that they were safe. But, you know, I think that there's a lot of confusion over, you know, how to approach what is involved in preserving an archive and determining what does need to be in it and what doesn't. A lot of towns, for example, and I'm sure this is true of Bartlett, there are lots of things in people's attics that shouldn't be there. So how does a historical society or a community deal with those issues? I spent 40 or 30 years working in English record offices, and the reason those were created was during World War II, everybody was afraid that every record in the country would be bombed to smithereens. There were a lot of archives in those days that were known and could be placed into a record office, but there remain many, many valuable documents hidden in people's attics because nobody is allowed to ask about them. Other than privately. No institution in England can do that. But in this country, we're a little bit more open. I don't know, Brian, maybe this is something you'd like to comment on. But it seems to me that, you know, Phil, you've built this remarkable space But then the question is how to have it really be an important repository for the history.
Brian, do you want to go first? Maybe talk a little bit about kind of how to find the best, I mean, I guess I see a couple of questions in Becky's question. One is, I think, about a kind of communications piece, like how do we connect with people who have treasures in their attic to make sure that their grandkids don't put them in a dumpster. I feel like that's the subtext. Becky didn't actually say that, but and then you know, how do we help people to know the best way to store things, and then maybe Phil, you can talk a little bit about how you go from a you know, a container to a space for collections.
Right.
When I speak to archivists, I try to suggest that one thing they should not do is try to let perfection get in the way. It is our constant battle to improve the condition of our records. And it depends on what resources you have and what your vision of the ideal storage area is. But to be constantly making improvements is a big deal in my book. Even if it's getting a dehumidifier for a basement, or if it's getting metal cabinets, or if it's getting there was a program offered by the Division of Vital Records about 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, that allowed towns to buy certain things for the preservation of documents. And many towns bought fireproof file folders, file cabinets. And my understanding is that Jefferson had a fire in their town office maybe 10 years ago, and they found the file cabinet in the basement. It had dropped from the second floor down to the basement. The documents were still in it because they had made the investment in a something that improved some part of their record storage. So that's one of the things that I try to point out to archivists. At the State Archives, we went through an awful lot of effort to try to create something that was ideal. And we found that the engineers, the contractors had no concept of what we were talking about. And they just built a residential vault again that had high humidity, fluctuation, blah, 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 blah. And we had to go through significant troubles to add to air conditioning and processing air flow and so on in this vault, just to get it pretty much what I would consider a fairly good vault.
So from our perspective, we had stuff, all kinds of things, paper, maps that were on some sort of fabric. I can see them. And then there's hard artifacts. The hard artifacts we really didn't have to worry about. So the farm tillers and all that kind of stuff they're taking care of themselves. But we had things stored pretty much in cold storage in a building that wasn't the best in the world. We have in the museum now, we have air conditioning in there, have a dehumidifier running all the time in the building and shipping water out in a PVC pipe so that it does not stay in the building. We've also invested in archival boxes and things that the terminology is not all there for me, but in sleeves that you know that
Mylar sleeves.
Yeah. And also what is it? Glass. The glass is oh dear. For pictures, they I can't think of it. Not off the top of my head anyway, but so we've done a lot of things to try to preserve the documents we have. We are storing things in very, very dry. Matter of fact, some cases that came out of the old church. There, you can't get any drier. Go here, the warm thing. But anyway, so we're working on that, but it is a challenge, definitely, because we're, documentation, as you said, is very fragile. We have a couple of maps, one of them from 1797 that needs to be preserved. And myself and the curator are the only two people who have touched that. And we have been so careful with it. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, and the thing I would add, that Becky's question sort of comments prompt for me is that, one of the things that I, as a kind of, as the director of a collecting institution, I am always thinking not about how can I get more things to come to us, partly because we don't have any space, but really thinking about where is the best place for this collection to end up so that it will get the most use, it will be the best cared for, it will be with kind of, it can like make good stories. That's not great grammar, but, and I think, it strikes me from your comments, Becky, I hadn't necessarily thought about the kind of know your neighbors as another, or this is another layer, but, my hope is that by all of us getting to know one another, learning about each other's collections, learning about each other's strengths and needs, and I honestly didn't know there was a toy museum in Ashland. That's on me, but now I know. And now when someone comes to us and says, oh, I have all these, I don't know what they would be, but I can say, oh, actually, I'm not the place for you. Let me put you in touch with this other person. And I think if each of us, when we talk with people who say, oh my gosh, my attic is, so full, as we know each other, thinking about, it's almost like the opposite of pooling resources. It's like distributing resources so they end up in the best place for their long-term preservation and their stewardship. And by knowing what each other's doing, maybe it ends up, we learn about somebody's attic, and if we can, one of us knows the others exist, and we can help to kind of get things to their right forever homes, as it were. So it strikes me that's a piece of what we can all be doing, and what, a potential positive outcome of getting to know one another and kind of staying connected, is that when those, when we walk up the attic stairs, we can have each other's collections in mind.
And to add to that point, we've actually started a little bit of a network, and it's starting to grow in the town, especially now that the building is open and we are an official museum. We've had a number of people walk in the door, some from as far away as New Jersey, who heard about what we were doing and brought to us a collection from their family. But we also have people in town, because we do know that there are people that have stuff in their attics. And one of the things that we find is that, the stuff's been up there for decades in some cases, and they're old photographs, and they've gone through heat and cold and moisture and everything else. And unfortunately, they're not in the best of condition. They certainly weren't taken by Nikons or anything like that. But it is starting to happen for us, and it is something that we're starting to grapple with, as to what we can do. On the other hand, if somebody comes into our museum with a deed from 1805, not going to turn it away. If it's a Bartlett deed. We have also, in going through our collection, found things that were from other towns, and so we're in the process right now of sending those things back to those towns, so that if they have a historical society. We had one thing that was in Braille. Somehow it ended up in ours because the name Bartlett was on it, and it had nothing to do with us. It was the guy's name, but it wasn't anyway. So it came from a school down in Massachusetts, and we're going to package that up carefully and send it off to them and say, this really belongs to you. And I hope they appreciate the fact that it's over 100 years old.
We recently got some postcards from Wyoming County, New York. Yeah, that they were going through their collection and were sort of, I mean culling in the nicest way. And came across a whole collection of White Mountain postcards, and they sent them to us in the mail, and I think some of them weren't duplicates. So, it's that same spirit of, let's get these things in the best place, right? They were never gonna come out of the box in Wyoming County, New York. They came out of someone's attic, ended up there, and didn't make the most sense. Yeah, Ruben.
I suspect other people have had similar experiences, but we have a lot of material that's never been seen, right? It's in file boxes, it's in drawers, it's in folders. And what we've tried to do is to put some of that on Facebook, and we thought about expanding it somehow through Past Perfect or some other collection, a vehicle, archive vehicle. Because when people see some of these materials, then it gets them interested. Often they call up, they send us things, they drop by. My fear is that over the long haul, a lot of the old material gets either thrown away, and then kids or the grandkids inherit a house, and a house with a garage full of things. And we see it sometimes show up in the dumpster in town. And then they dump all kinds of stuff on top of it. Like, oh my God. And they've jumped in a few times to rescue some things. But I just got a call recently from an elderly couple from downstate, down in the southeast corner. And they have long routes to the Burford Gorham area. The family, the grandparents, great grandparents, and others worked on the railroad. They have booklets of pictures and other things. And they said, our kids don't want them. Do you guys want them? And I said, you get up here at all? And they said, not anymore. We used to hike a lot. I said, I'll come to you. I'll come to you next week, in fact. Because we'd love to have these and to see them and to have them. That's kind of a rare thing that happens, but it does happen. The other thing that we tried and had some success is we put out some notices a few years back that if you have family albums, pictures of Gorham, buildings, events, people, could you bring them into the library sometime on such and such a date and time, and we'll look through them and scan some things if we can, or if you want to donate them to us, that's great too. And we've had a few people do that. We've gotten some gems that way. But it's hard, and as everything gets digitized, I think we're going to lose a lot of the images that we've kind of been used to dealing with, because people clear out their phones, they clear out their laptop, they smash their hard drive because they don't want people to see what's on it. Letters, email, whatever, and a lot of that's just going to vaporize with the modern technology, which is a blessing, but also kind of a curse. The final thing is I learned a hard lesson myself recently using an Apple product. I love Apple. But what I didn't know is that my current laptop, which is a Mac Pro, doesn't actually have a hard drive. My laptops always have hard drives. I thought they still had hard drives. I found out the hard drive that it didn't. It has a logic board and everything's on the cloud. And I knew a little bit about the cloud, but I didn't know one thing, is that if you're using Microsoft products, as opposed to Apple products alone, Apple products, all the creations go to the cloud, to the iCloud. But if you're on Microsoft or some other thing, you have to tell the Apple computer, send that to the cloud too. So when my logic board died, I lost a whole bunch of work that was on Microsoft and PowerPoint, and Excel just disappeared. And I thought for sure it was on the cloud. Luckily, some key things are on a second older laptop, which is still running like a charm. But my new one, 4 years old, died and just about gave me heart failure.
Yeah, the born digital, it's its own, it's the, we talk about the sort of born digital materials, right? That all the things we make on our phones and our computers. It's a whole nother archival dilemma for sure. Bob, did you wanna add
Yeah,
something?
I, just a minute to lean in on something. Richard Candy can probably pick it up because he's on a committee I am not on. But in Portsmouth, where we're lucky to have millions of documents, but it gives us a lot of problems too. You have places like the Athenaeum, the Portsmouth Historical Society, Waterhouse, Moffett Lad, all of these organizations own documents and what to do with them, and then to make them accessible. Luckily, we do have the Athenaeum, but it's a terrible burden on the Athenaeum working in that historic building. We have just had to go buy major space, renting space from the synagogue right downtown, and that's helping keep some things in town. But the Athenaeum has had things on file from other historic organizations for, I don't know, 50, 100 years. We have North Church documents, things from other museum houses. Portsmouth Historical Society has no library, no records. I'm not knocking that, but everything they have goes to the Athenaeum. Now, there should be a long-term plan that they should be feeding money in to be supporting this, but the Athenaeum is sort of getting tight. Portsmouth Library is very helpful because they do have historical departments and they safely have a lot of things there, but they're at their limit. Luckily, the city has been cooperative lately, and there's a whole group of people, Richard's on one of the people, that are meeting for a city organized archives that the historical societies will all participate in. Now, how this will work out and if it will happen or not, but these meetings have been actively going for a couple of years. So here's how one large city is seeing the problem, but there's actually active work on it. The good thing about the Athenaeum having as much as they have, if you are a researcher looking for something and you know it may be owned by the North Church, how you would ever get to somebody in that organization to look at it. But with everything organized at the Athenaeum and open at least 5 days a week, someone can get at that material quickly. But it can be better and we're going in that direction. I don't know whether Richard wants to add anything to that or not.
Yeah, it looks like he's unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Yeah, the city has a blue ribbon commission to figure out how to do this. We're just about hiring a lawyer who will deal with the immense amount of questions as to how do you do this. And of course, the other problem is, where are you going to build this building, or what building will you renovate to do it in? So I think it's a 10 or 15-year project. But you might as well start now. We're not getting any younger.
Yeah, thanks. So it's we're approaching the end of our time, and I want to be sure that we spend a little bit of time talking about what folks would like to have next. It's one of the other kind of top contenders in the poll that we sent out after the event in June was a disaster plan writing workshop. And I put, I don't know, maybe we'll just put the link in the chat now, Kayla, for the survey. I put a kind of long form question on the survey to, I'd love to hear both now and, later, if it comes to you later, if disaster planning is something that people are interested in, what kind of format you'd like that to take. Do you want, we had a little bit of a presentation from Jesse last summer about, about planning, but it wasn't kind of nuts and bolts, like what should be in your document. It was more kind of risk assessment tools. So do people want, templates? Do people want it to be a kind of writing workshop, bring your draft, share drafts in advance? I can imagine a couple of different ways we would do it, but I wanted to get some more feedback before I kind of kept going, or if you're, you have some ideas and we, in theory, we have a steering committee for this, which is Brian, Rodney, Keene, and Alyssa here on campus. But if you, if you want to kind of help shape this, as I said in June, this is sort of this is a passion project for me. I, think the advisory council for the museum, since 2 of 10 of them are here, and they're very supportive of us doing this. I think we're all in agreement that this is important work, but I am only one human. So, if you have strong feelings about getting involved, please let me know. So I want to kind of open the floor to thoughts on next steps, whether it's specifically disaster planning or other topics.
Can I ask one question while they're thinking? But over the summer, we had a few weather incidents that happened north of the Notch that didn't happen south of the Notch. So those of us who live in the south part of the state were totally oblivious to any problems that might have been going on. But fortunately, Megan reached out, and I don't know how that was received by various individuals. Did it?
Sorry about that. I think most of the, I guess maybe Ruben, but I don't know if anyone who's on Zoom or in the room had any thoughts about kind of post, was it still a hurricane when Beryl came through? Whether I think I was traveling at the time. Kayla reached out to the list of folks we had to see if people had any issues after that big storm in July. And then we reached out specifically to a couple of other institutions. But I think the question is really sort of, did that work? And is there a better way? Maybe we can kind of be in touch after natural disasters, or other ways we can kind of mobilize our phone tree.
Exactly. Yeah.
Becky? Oh, I can't, I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix this for you folks in person, but go ahead, Becky, or let's see.
Well,
Okay,
can you hear me or not?
Yes.
And the other people on Zoom, Lisi?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so I think that the one thing this is a terrific effort. It needs to reach as big a group as possible. So, because, no point in the choir chatting to each other. I think that having an online disaster plan workshop that people would sign up for, maybe even multiple times. And I know that you had, that the group that ran, the one woman from Vermont. I think that if you had some real hands-on something for people to prepare ahead and then meet and review it, would perhaps go a long way to helping the group coalesce and proliferate.
Yeah.
Just a
That's
thought.
kind of, yeah, that's what I'm that maybe it's a couple, maybe it's 2 parts, that there's homework, that there's,
And
peer
maybe
review.
multiple times.
Yeah. I mean,
Evening and daytime.
yeah. Other thoughts about kind of next steps? Becky?
Other people should jump in. I have seen it quite successful in communities where people will have an organization like a historical society will have a designated day for people to bring in historical artifacts, kind of like Antiques Roadshow. Bring your favorite thing from your house, and we'll have somebody come. I mean, could be one of the rest of us, because you've got quite a group of people here, all of whom have quite a lot of experience. They're not necessarily going to be experts at setting prices, but at least in a position to say, that's a really interesting thing. How are you storing it? And then the word gets out that the whichever organization it is a place to go to find out how to manage historical materials of any sort.
Yeah, and that's kind of, I didn't repeat what Ruben said. I hope that you all could hear him, but I think that, you know, expanding beyond the photo albums and, you know, thinking about kind of a broader net.
Right.
You know, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And people seem to like to do it too.
Yeah, especially in summer.
It's a little like, well, I'm sure everybody, maybe people heard the program, was it yesterday or the day before on NHPR about Old Home Week, an Old Home Day that 7 to Save has included it. And Andrew Cushing gave a very good explanation. Well, combining an Old Home Day with a Bring Out Your Artifacts sounds a little like Monty Python. Is could be a way of you know, making, you know, because of the Old Home Week, I thought Andrew did a very good job at explaining how much work they are, but a 1 day kind of Old Home Week, Old Home Day, and Bring Out Your Artifacts of interest could be quite fascinating and generate some local interest. I mean, kids could be bringing something, you know. You know, I want the children in Lancaster to go around and record their favorite house and then learn about it as a toe in.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like also a great thing to think about for 2026 as a way of kind of building, you know, connecting to energy around America's 250th, to think about how is it not only this history that maybe seems very distant, you know, even if we could look at Revolutionary era papers or help transcribe them, but also the history that's just around you, and bringing that in for events like that seems really interesting too.